Hey guys, it's Wednesday. Welcome into Storytime. I don't know about you, but I really look forward to this point in my week because it's a time to just relax and hang out with friends. And so I really look forward to this. It's a really great way to kind of even out my week if it's been crazy. Wraith, you need a spell check, sir. Alright. Let me turn this down a little bit on my end. Trying not to blow my eardrums. I'll put that up a little bit for you guys. Let me know if it's too loud. I'm trying to find a balance. I hope everybody's had a good week so far. It's been kind of a quiet one for me, which is good because we're getting to a point in the year where it's about to get really busy. So I'm taking the quiet at work while I can get it. So just kind of enjoying the little bit of downtime that I have at work. And like I said, I really look forward to Wednesday because I get to hang out with you guys. And this week we're continuing our journey into Age of Darkness with chapters 6 to 10. Before I start, does anybody have any questions? Would you like a recap for anybody who was not here? It's okay, I can't type most days either, Wraith. Oh, sorry. Also, do let me know if the closed captioning is functioning. Okay, good. Just making sure. Just making sure. Hey, lurkers are totally fine in this stream. I'm okay with that. It's kind of what it's designed for. Especially reading streams. Oh, I see some names that I recognize. That's okay. They are totally allowed to lurk. Alright. Give me just 1 second. Getting stuff sorted. It's actually nuts. Okay. Yeah, I apologize for any audio hiccups we had during the starting soon screen. As most of you know, I tend to let that run for about 10 minutes so that we can let the ads go by and so that we can hopefully have less, so we don't have to deal with pre-roll ads for anybody that's coming into the stream. It's just something I try to do to make it a little bit nicer for people who may be joining us. Okay. Just getting myself situated here. Frosty tools, always in rare form. Sorry. I unfortunately don't mute my mic because of the way the closed captions work. If I mute my mic, it breaks the closed captions for a little bit. So I am attempting to not mute. I'll just take another drink of water. actually going to fix my cup here. Apologize for the extra noise. All right. Can you guys hear the music okay? I'm constantly struggling with the levels. All right. Okay. So last time we were here for story time, we read chapters technically 2 through 5, because chapter 1 was a prologue of Age of Darkness, and we will continue this evening with starting with chapter 6. Hi, Sassy! Welcome in, Miss Ma'am. Good to see you. I love Frosty Tools. I'm doing well today. I was just telling chat that I always look forward to my Wednesday streams, especially the storytime ones, because they're like really chill. Even if the story itself may not be. My day went well. It's as I was telling chat, it's kind of quiet right now at work. I know I shouldn't say the Q word, but it's always kind of slow this time of year, but it is getting to the point where it is going to get busy. So I'm enjoying the relative calm while I can. Sorry about that. There we go. Apparently have not been drinking enough water today. Let me fix that. All right. Okay. You know, I've actually been considering getting a prompter from Elgato, especially for the reading streams. What do you guys think? Something I've been thinking about. An upgrade that's a little bit down the road. I have been looking at it and researching it because I think it would be a big help, specifically for the reading streams. So, something that's on my list of things to acquire at some point. All right. should I add it to my my throne list, perhaps? Maybe. I do have one. But yeah, I have been thinking that it would be especially helpful for the reading streams, because that way it's actually designed so it sits like up here on your camera, like, and it projects the text. So I think that would be really cool. Also, new camera. So let me know if you guys see any camera issues or video cutting out or anything like that. The previous camera that I was testing was giving me all kinds of issues, so I would appreciate it if you guys could keep an eye out for any issues like I was having. And do let me know in chat if you see anything. I'll probably notice it if there is. But definitely would be helpful. Yeah, I don't have a lot on there right now. It's a couple of larger things. Like, I think I have a Quest 2 on there. Because there's a couple of VR games that I really want to play that I can't because I don't have a Quest 2 or anything like that. So I think I have a Quest 2 on there. and a couple of other things. There's nothing like ridiculously expensive, but yeah. Um, I don't have a massive list or anything like that. All right. And yes, Wraith, before you ask again, I did do my eye drops. I did. All right. Ah. Okay. Just trying to get all of my stuff on OBS so I can see it on the other screen. Okay. Okay. Chapter 6. Aboard the Firebird. With a sigh, Callista stepped into the guest cabin and sank down on the edge of the bunk to pull her boots off before she changed into her sleep clothes. She hadn't quite expected things to go as they had. Shab. She knew it would be hard to hide the frustration and irritation from either Mick or Ari. Zan was already in bed, his back to her, but she could tell he wasn't really sleeping. Strelbait. Zan cut the tension in the darkened room, using his nickname for Evelina. She must hate me right now. Callista swore softly. I don't know, Zeneca. She can tell you're angry about something. And she knew you and Mick were fighting. Shab, that girl is smart. She flipped down on her back and snuggled up close. Any way you could make it up to her? Zan sighed. I don't know right now, Sharika. Whenever I think about going to her and talking to her, I keep seeing Mick and Ari wanting to pull their heads. Okay, sorry. I keep seeing Mick and Ari wanting to pull their heads out of their shebs forcibly. If I go and talk to her now, I can guarantee that what happens when we land will hurt her even more. Callista shrugged. I think she's sleeping right now, or at least trying to. She's in the captain's quarters with Mick and Ari. With a frustrated sigh, she ran her fingers through her dark hair. Mick pretty much figured out that you want to toss him around. He said as much, but won't allow it to happen aboard the Firebird. He thinks you're going to do it, though. Not me. As to Ari, she only picked up how frustrated I was. Kinda glad Strillbait didn't elaborate for her. Zan chuckled briefly, but it was dark. That kid is going to be one powerful Jedi. Emphasis on the Jedi part. He shifted a little closer to his wife. Oh, I'm going to give Mick his receipt, all right. But I want my hands on Ari first. He caught a slight bit of humor from Callista. Cute, but you know what I meant. She's the important cog in this plan. I'll make sure she understands the importance of her knowledge and her experience. Callista smirked slightly, but it faded quickly. I can understand her wanting to get away from politics. Shab, none of us want our hands in it anyway. That's no way to raise a kid either. But she does have important skills. Honestly, I was shocked at how withdrawn and closed off she was when I met her all those years ago. She still is, to an extent. Both of them have all the experience that the Order needs. It's something we can't substitute with books, and not the kind of experience I want to toss students into, either. She left the Order because Micron was dead and became greater in influence and experience than the presidents and chiefs of state she served under. Fine, but Micron isn't dead. She's got a second chance at youth now and a daughter that will surpass them both in power and control, and she sits on the sidelines, letting Mick have this old man's fantasy of going back to how things used to be. She can counsel Stefan and everyone else to abandon Coruscant, but she doesn't even call us except for Evelina's birthdays or a family dinner once in a while. And whenever I bring up the subject, she wants nothing to do with it. Mick doesn't know how often I've asked her for help. I had no idea, Callista said softly. Shab, you barely talked to me about it either. She rebuked him softly, poking him gently in the ribs as she snuggled up closer. I don't know how to get either of them to see how much they're needed. I get the feeling that they'll feel betrayed once we pull this. I hope it will open their eyes. And everyone else's as well. Zan turned around and wrapped her in his arms. I didn't bring it up with you because you've had more than your fair share of situations with what's been happening lately. How many autopsies and family condolences have you done in the last 3 years? You've had only snippets of my visions, and they've scared you silly. I couldn't add to your burdens with that, Zan sighed. And they may feel betrayed. Every Jedi will when I pull this. Though I sense that my plan will end up doing something, I don't want it to happen in other ways. He kissed the top of her head. As for those two, they can feel betrayed all they want for a while, but they will be back in the Order, and they will do their duty that they've neglected during their fantasy. What else are you worried about, Sierra? Are you worried we might lose more Jedi because some might leave the Order? Zan smirked. I sense Stefan is pulling some strings of his own, using them to ensnare me into something I don't want. She quirked an eyebrow. How do you mean? Zan sighed. What do you do with troublemakers, Calica? Think about it a minute. She grinned. Keep them where you can watch them at all times. Are you saying there's a concern you'll go and do something rash? Zan laughed. Naish, Sherika. More like payback for what I've been and am going to do. She raised an eyebrow as she thought about it more. So, they'll give you some authority, another job to worry about, maybe? Not like you don't have enough to do already. She sighed and traced her fingers down his bare chest. Very good, Master Tesserin. It seems you're finally getting the sensing skills you used to be so jealous about. She eyed him sideways. Don't you start, Canadius. Her tone had a slight edge, but there was no anger. Zan chuckled and leaned in to kiss her. But this brings me to another thing that I've been considering. Maven? She asked, her eyebrow quirking again. Zan's face darkened, but this time out of fear rather than anger. Remember those sessions I spent studying other Force traditions, specifically the Ang-Ti techniques? A little, Alec, she said softly, sensing the cold chill in his sense in the Force. She snuggled close. One of the things I learned was a rare skill only taught to the heads of their society, a skill that in their tradition was done to pass on leadership skills to the candidate upon the old leader's moment of death. They called it, unsurprisingly, death projection. Callista frowned. I've never heard of that. Do you even know how it works? Zan smiled. It's like a projective vision. The old and dying master shares their skills and experiences via a vision that pierces the candidate's walls. The candidate can do nothing but bear witness to what they are forced to see. She frowned. I can see its use, though it is a bit brutal. Zan merely nodded. But I doubt anyone in the entire Order has seen what I have seen, and this is the only way to get through to them how bad this vision is and why we can't allow it to come true. How would you even accomplish such a thing? Zan's face became more like a mask. Another of my skills is using Force generation. I essentially can act like a human turbine, collecting Force energy and cycling it into a skill I need or allowing it to feed back to the other users. I intend to generate a large audience during this fight, and I will use the Force they generate at one point to feed this vision into everyone there. Have you considered that forcibly sending this vision could do damage to some? The Knights and Masters can probably handle it, but I don't know about the students. Zan nodded. I can buffer the force of the energy I receive and the intensity into more delicate minds. I've been practicing the skill quite a bit. Ask Allie about Zan's experiments if you don't believe me. That surprised her. What have you been doing with my Padawan, Sierra? With Desi, I haven't been doing anything to her. I've been having her monitor the health of the volunteers and myself during these training sessions. She searched his face. And why didn't you tell me about this? If it's so important, I should have been informed. Zan was starting to get annoyed. Because I needed to find my limits about what I could do for myself. Udasi, she said. Kissing him gently, she snuggled close. I wouldn't have interfered. You would have stopped it if I explained this to you before these training sessions, and don't tell me differently, Master Healer, Zan said. He was still annoyed, but less so. Anything that is a potential risk to those involved must be cleared by Council, the Master Healer, or placed leadership, he said, reciting the Council directive. Her lips quirked slightly. And how exactly did you convince Allie to help you? She asked, with a slight grin as she thought of her bubbly Padawan. All expenses paid trip to Volusia with clearance to go for me, Zan said, groaning. Callista couldn't help it and burst out laughing. She sure knows how to wrap my husband around her finger. She is your Padawan, you know. Sharon is pestering her for tips already, Zan groaned. What exactly are you saying, Sherika? She asked with a grin as she poked him in the ribs. Sharon wants a trip of her own. Zan shook his head. I'm supposed to be the big, bad Mandoad Shiboisi that everyone's afraid of, yet those two don't seem to get that. Well, I don't either, so I guess it rubs off. She grinned wickedly. This Mandoad, as I've discovered, has a soft core under all that Beskar, she said softly as she walked her fingers up his chest before kissing him lightly. Zan chuckled. Maybe, Sherika, but for the next few days I've got to be anything but soft. He kissed her again before looking her directly in her blue eyes. If you don't want to help me with this, you can say so now, and I'll take the fall alone. No hard feelings. She gave him a long look. Are you sure? I do think the wake-up call is needed. I'm a little worried about the risk to some students with the vision. I won't stop you, Sharika. You wouldn't go to all the trouble if it weren't that serious. She sighed. You know, there are times that we won't agree, but you must do what you feel is right. Just be prepared for some backlash. Zan sighed. That's the whole point, Calica. I'm not doing this and thinking I'm getting away with this scot-free, but it has to be done. He sighed and looked at her closely. The vision. You need to hear this first. We have an ad starting in just under 5 minutes. Something in his tone made her swallow involuntarily, and her grip on his hand tightened. You want to know why this was so important? Well, if they don't get this wake-up call... Seriously. Oh, dear. It's gonna do it again. Hold on, guys. Okay. Oh, dear. Yeah, kind of figured. But oh, dang it. Hold on, guys. I'm gonna try something. I feel like it's overheating, maybe. Oh, dear. Give me just a second, guys. I'm gonna mess with something. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't think that it was gonna do this. I don't know why. Should be working. Okay. Give me just a second. Okay. Alright, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so maybe, yeah, this camera is doing the same thing that the other one was doing, but, well, wondering if it's actually, like, overheating. Which is a possibility. This room does get kind of warm. So, let me try something. But, what I did just now was actually just unplug the camera and plug it back in, which seems to have solved it for the moment. So, and we're back from our ad. Okay. Apologize for the wait, guys. Give me just a second. Alright. There we go. Yeah. So, I apologize for the tech issues. I may just have to give this camera a break every now and again. Or I could do what I want to do. Let's try that. See if it brings the temperature in the room down a little bit. It's not super hot in here, so I don't know why it's doing that. But, we'll see. Okay. Alright, but for the moment, it is working. Alright. Yeah. Alright. Alrighty. I was trying to remember where I was. Chapter-wise. Give me a second. Oh, I remember now. Okay. You wanted to know why this was so important. Well, if they don't get this wake-up call now, then events will spin out of our control, so much so that we end up with no future. His voice cracked. I saw the galaxy die. What? She gasped, and her voice caught in her throat as she tried to wrap her mind around the mere thought of it. How? The wounds in the Force, Ciarca. You know how numerous they are, but what can be done to heal them correctly? He told her softly. If we don't do something now, these wounds will multiply exponentially, so much so that the Force itself will die. And if the Force dies, we die. She choked out before burying her face in his shoulder. Not just the Jetise, Ciarca. All life, a galaxy-wide wound in the Force. And since we haven't been able to perfect extragalactic travel yet... She stilled in his embrace for a long moment, shaking slightly as she tried to wrap her brain around the implications of his words. You see why it's time for for me to be blunt and brutal now? You still want to back away? He asked. He was already ready to fall asleep, but he was waiting for her decision. There was silence between them for a long moment as she considered what he just said. She was a healer. Bluntness and brutality weren't really in her nature, but she didn't exactly coat things in ujale either. Ciarca, if what you see is true, then we must do something. But how can you know? The future is always in motion. The more you focus on something happening, the more chance that it will. There is something connecting everything. All these events we are witnessing, but who is doing the connecting? I can't say. There are holes, pieces of the vision missing. I know that this is not by chance. She sighed heavily and leaned into his shoulder again. I told you that I'd help you confront Ari and Mick, but the vision, you're on your own. I have no idea its effect or ramifications, so I'll have to be mindful of that. Zane nodded. It's all I can ask for anyway. Let's get some sleep. Deal with this once we reach Catan. Mm-hmm. She responded sleepily as she snuggled into his chest. Her breathing evened out a little as she fell asleep, and her arms wrapped firmly around him as if she didn't want to let go. Evelina's slow and steady breathing rose and fell with the rhythm of the Firebird's hyperdrive. Mick's princess slept content and peaceful in a small bed across the spacious interior of the captain's quarters. The rogue lay awake, staring at the ceiling and concentrating on his breathing. Zan had successfully shattered his calm. Usually, that was no easy task, but Zan was family, which made matters much more interesting. Were Zan a subordinate in the military, Mick would have been all over him like a hut on a bucket of whatever it is huts eat. Hell, if Mick were still officially in the Order, he'd have mopped the floor with him and had him scrubbing latrines in the temple for a month for gross insubordination. As it was, Micron's only real tie to the kid was being his adopted father-in-law. He needed a serious attitude adjustment, no doubt about that. How and why he'd become so disrespectful was even more perplexing. So, Ari said, lying next to him. She placed a hand gently on his chest and whispered, "What was that all about?" Micron sighed. "Apparently, Zan has some abandonment issues." Ari stifled a laugh. "Really? The card from Beskar and Stoicism Mando is having feelings of insecurity?" "Yeah." Mick turned to face those icy blues he loved. "Weird, huh?" "That's an understatement." Mick shrugged. "He feels as though Stefan has shirked his duty as Grand Master of the Order. The Council has been doing nothing for the past 3 years. You and I are off on some fantasy thrill vacation. Basically, we've all left him and Callie to run the universe in our unexcused absences." "There is so much wrong with that statement that I don't even know where to begin." Ari shook her head incredulously. "Tell me about it," Mick nodded. "Where is this even coming from?" "Stefan's been working himself to death trying to replenish the Jedi ranks, making sure they have students to train, supplies to keep the various academies running. He's got knights with hardly a month of experience under their belts out on recruitment runs from here to the Outer Rim and back. Not to mention all the time he spends in council meetings trying to keep everyone on task with what's been going on." Ari fumed. "The council has been going mad, as short-staffed as it is, trying to hold everything together, and Zan's upset because of what, exactly?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out." Mick scratched his head and stared at the ceiling. "He's about as subtle as a hut at feeding time, but he must have been bottling all this up for a while with the way he snapped." "The way he snapped?" Ari interrupted. "What exactly did he say that made you snap anyway? That's not like you, Meg. Not with family, anyway." "Oh." Mick grew quiet. "Yeah." He said, "You've been fulfilling some Corellian hollow fantasy, and Han Solo you ain't." "Okay," Ari said, taken aback. "So his being family is why he's not a grease stain on the decking. I rescind my previous question." Mick chuckled, but continued to stare at the ceiling bulkhead. "Still," Ari continued, "we left him to run the universe? We never ran the universe. We had important jobs, sure. We may have been more active in the upper echelons of things, but it's not like we've dropped off the face of the galaxy entirely." "No," Mick agreed, "but I guess we aren't as visibly active in things as we used to be. I've always thought that was a good thing, though. You and I can't always save the New Republic and the rest of the galaxy. What's going to happen when we're gone?" "I know." Ari sighed and was quiet. The hum of the ship and Evelina's soft breathing provided a soothing backdrop to a troubling conversation. "But," she said, finally, "we're not gone yet." "No," Mick agreed. "No, we're not." "Maybe that's the point Zan's trying to make," Ari hazarded a guess. "Granted, he's doing a terrible job of making his point, but I guess it's possible." Yeah, Mick said, but what do we do? Rejoin the Order? Stage a coup? Oust Maxwell and put you back in charge? I don't even know how we could rejoin the Order or if I'd even want to. Stefan's been having me guest teach at his Praxium, and he's been teaching the kids there a wider, more rogue-friendly view of things. But they're still Jedi. I can't recite the code as though I believe in it, and I'm pretty sure that staging a coup is still considered treason inside the New Republic. Besides, it's not as though we've been sitting on our hands all this time. We've been investigating these force wounds. I've been running covert ops for the New Republic, and you've been consulting. Is that not enough? Ari and Mick were quiet for some time. Again, the sounds of the ship at night reclaimed their dominance. On a shelf above the bed he and Ari shared was a long cylindrical object, caked in dust and scratched in places. Next to it sat an ancient hollow of the man that it belonged to. Mick's eyes fell on the hilt of his old master's light staff, and Ari breathed a small sigh. You and I both know what he would have said. She kissed his cheek and rolled over to snuggle deeper into her pillow. Yeah, Mick nodded, finally taking his eyes off the hilt. He rolled over and put his arm around Ari's slender waist. He'd tell me it never is. The rogue kissed his wife. We'll settle things once we're dirtside, which is unfortunately only 5 hours away. So, 4 hours of sleep, 1 hour of awkward tension while everyone wakes up and gets ready for the day, and then a day full of fun and surprises on Catan. Sounds lovely, dear. Ari yawned sleepily. Now, would you kindly shut up so I can get that sleep thing you mentioned? Mick smiled and hugged her closer. As you wish, Your Highness. I am reading. Welcome in, Shadow Legion. Okay. Chapter 7. Mick was up and at the controls well before he needed to be. For many reasons, he'd had trouble falling and then staying asleep. An hour before they would reach Catan, he woke the others. Zan had grunted, but at least maintained the appearance of civility. Callista seemed positively frazzled. On one hand, she was overtly friendly to Arya and Mick. On the other, she seemed hesitant and standoffish. Evelina was bouncing off the bulkheads from the start. The excitement of visiting Catan and the ensuing birthday party were enough to set the toddler to fits of overzealous joy, but at least she was happy. Mick worried about how empathic she was and how easily she picked up on people's moods, and then was affected by them. Shaking his head, he pulled the levers and dropped the Firebird back into real space. Catan hung beautifully just out the forward viewport, in the co-pilot's chair, clapping her hands in excitement. It's Catan, she cried, pointing. You got it, kiddo. Mick smiled as he calmed system control. Catan STC, this is Freighter Firebird en route to the Card residence, requesting clearance to enter Catani space. We copy your identification, Firebird, and we were told to expect you. The controller acknowledged on the other end of the line. You are cleared for approach. Please set transponder frequency to 201.58. Acknowledged, Control, Mick replied. Frequency set, awaiting course update and nav data. Why do you talk funny on the headset, Daddy? Evelina looked up at the robe with icy blues that matched her mother's. It's to make sure everyone on the comm understands what's being said, Mick said with a smile. Oh! She nodded sagely and turned her attention back to the forward viewport. Update sent, Firebird. Use caution when crossing the Terminator. We have a Nighthawk squadron on training maneuvers. STC, out. Roger that, Mick calmed as he laid in the course and pointed the Firebird towards the updated coordinates. Firebird out. Here we go! Evelina checked the straps on her harness. I love flying! Me too, Princess. Me too. As soon as the reversion was complete, Zan's demeanor changed. If he'd been stiff and civil beforehand, now he was stoic and pulsating with irritation. It took a lot of work to keep from broadcasting that to Evelina. Thankfully, the excitement of the visit and her father's talk with STC kept her attention on other things enough of him right then. Zan didn't say much. He ensured his helmet was clipped to his belt and readjusted his gloves. Kalisa looked up from checking the clips holding her plates in place. Udesi, Zanika. If you don't tamp down, Meg will probably be asking all sorts of questions. She sighed. While she didn't fully agree with the method, she did agree that something had to be done. What worried her more was how Zan's projection of his vision would affect those gathered. She shook her head. No use fretting over it now. With a deep breath, she felt her shoulders relax, at least a little, as she clipped her sabers to her belt, followed soon by her helmet. Within 20 minutes, Mick had crested the first of the mountains that marked the range where Stefan's home was nestled. It was just after sunrise on this side of the planet, and as the estate came into view, the lake shone in brilliant golden light. The grass and trees surrounding the estate were bathed in the warmth reflected from those crystalline waters, and the house at the foot of the hills glowed in the morning sun. It was about as picturesque as a holovid, and Mick couldn't help but enjoy the sight, even though he could feel Zan tensing up in the back like a wild cat ready to pounce. Gently and with practiced hand, he brought the Firebird down onto the landing pad just south of the house. As the engines ticked and cooled, he triggered the ramp and scooped Evelina up in his arms. He made for the ramp with Ari in tow and found Stefan waiting for them on the tarmac below. "Hey, Stefan," Mick called as he set Evelina down. The small girl ran to Card with her arms outstretched. "Uncle Stefan!" she cried, leaping towards the Jedi. Behind Mick and Ari, the row could hear the Beskar-laden footfalls of Zan and Callie exiting the Firebird. Stefan laughed as he scooped her into his arms and spun her around in a hug. Jade was there as well, grinning as Evelina stretched out to get a hug from her, too. Zan and Callista made their way down the ramp shortly after Ari, Evelina, and Mick, and Callie made her way to Stefan. Zan hung back to keep his hands busy, fussing with the luggage. "She's about Ian's size now," Stefan said as he greeted Mick with the warrior's grip and hugged Ari after a moment. "Safe trip, I trust?" He didn't wait for the answer as he hugged Callista and looked at her. "You seem tense, daughter," he told her as he looked at Zan and then at Mick and Ari. "You all do." Mick caught the Jedi's eye. "Safe," he said. "I don't know about uneventful," he sent, nodding over his shoulder to where Zan was pacing a track in the Duracrete. Callista deftly skirted around Mick and Ari, making her way over to hug Stefan and Jade briefly. It was hard to keep such a tight rein on her feelings. She shifted a little at Stefan's comment, unsure of what to say. Stefan arched an eyebrow and looked between them again. "Well, Andrea isn't here yet, and Dylan is currently going through lessons with the students with Rinnia, so it's just us." "Have you had breakfast yet?" Jade asked them as she set Evelina down on the landing pad. Zan still said nothing as he kept himself away from the family reunion. He kept rubbing his gloved hands together and pacing. "Evelina," Ari said, "why don't you go ahead with your Aunt Jade and see if she needs help with breakfast?" "Can I?" Evelina asked. "I don't have to help unpack?" "If it's okay with your Aunt Jade," Mick said, looking to her for help and hoping she'd understand. "I don't see when it wouldn't be okay," Jade told him with a grin. She offered her hand and let Evelina lead her down the path towards the house. Stefan stayed there on the pad and looked at all of them. He had felt it when they entered the system, but remained quiet about it for now. As Jade and Evelina made their way down the path towards the house, Zan's pacing stopped, but the tension, once palpable, was now electric. He remained quiet and held himself back, but he could now broadcast without fear of Evelina mistaking his anger. Once they were well out of sight, Mick and Ari turned so everyone faced each other. Stefan kept looking between them and noticed that no one was saying anything. He knew that Zan was the source of all of it, and that the best, if not the only, route to the solution was at the source. "Zan," he asked, now concerned for all his friends and family. Zan looked at Stefan and did nothing to keep the anger from his voice. "I'm calling in a favor, Card," he growled and pointed. "Those two are done with their holofantasy. They may have resigned their ranks long ago, but the circumstances no longer apply." Callista's gaze slid briefly in Zan's direction before she looked back to Stefan, wondering how he'd take all of this. She stood lightly on the balls of her feet, ready to move if needed. "Again with the disrespect," Mick snapped. "You got some nerve, kid. You should really try to think about what you say before you say it." Stefan straightened slightly, catching Callista's eye, and nodded ever so slightly to her that he was fine for the moment. He looked to Mick and Ari and could tell from their reaction that this wasn't the first discussion they'd had on the subject. And then he looked to Zan for his response before he said anything. I don't know where you get your info, but it's pretty far off course, Zan, Ari said. We may not be pulling the same strings, but that doesn't mean we've abandoned the galaxy. Or you and Callie. Callista's lips thinned to a line at that. How do you expect us to react? Coruscant doesn't have many Jedi there. I realize we're losing Jedi all the time, but we weren't given any guidance. And what the criff is this about a council meeting? We weren't informed. Save it, Zan barked. I've tried coming to you for advice, General. He said the word bitterly, and every time I get blown off saying those days are behind you while you play chummy with the New Republic in unofficial channels. Watch your tone. Mick's voice was a blast of icy water infused with the power of the Force as it began to course through him. The hair on the back of his arms began to stand on end, but he kept it in check. Zan's eyes flashed dangerously as he walked towards them. As for you, Rogue, you can save your Ossic. And with that, he drilled Micron with a right hook. There's your receipt for getting your hands on me before. Mick rolled with the right hook, and the Force rushed in on him all at once. Coming back around, he drove his right hand into Zan's stomach and pushed. The force of the push dented Beskar and sent the Mandalorian flying. I said, watch your tone, boy. Micron! Ari forced herself in front of her husband and put both hands on his shoulders. Enough! Stefan stepped between them before Zan could get back up. At this point, he didn't know if he could even stop them. Enough, he finally said, his voice stern and loud enough, he hoped, to get everyone's attention before it got out of hand. Zan fell back, stunned, but rolled with the momentum, rolling butt over helmet, but making it back to his feet. He grinned ferally. What's the matter, Corellian? Need to rely on the Force all the time? He then noticed Stefan and growled, Fine, Stefan. I want the ranks reactivated now and placed in intelligence. I fight like I was trained, boy, Mick said. I was a lifer in the New Republic military. We fight to win, but I don't need the Force to lay you out where you stand. Mick's comment made Callista bristle slightly, and she moved to take a step towards the group, barely stopping herself from going for her saber. Stefan shot her a warning glance, his eyes ordering her to stay her hand. She bit her lip, but nodded. Her hand didn't move any closer to her saber, but it didn't move away either. I said enough, Stefan yelled. Both of you. Mick, Ari tried again. Please. The rogue found her icy blues, and the air lost some of its charge. He breathed and calmed himself, whispering to his wife, I'm sorry. We have an ad starting in just under 5 minutes. Zan shook his head. No, Stefan, if you don't do this, then I will, he growled. You have no idea why I need this. Do what? Mick and Ari asked simultaneously. What are you so worked up about? Ari asked. It's not like you, Zan. Stefan held out a hand to Mick and Ari as he slowly looked at Zan and walked towards him. The question in his eyes, but he moved closer to ask it. What is this about, Zan? I'm asking calmly. Zan faltered before looking at his hands. His Force presence now wasn't radiating anger, but sheer self-loathing. He looked up at the others before uncharacteristically falling to his knees. Stefan knelt with him, his hand resting on Zan's shoulder. Deep breath, Zan. We're right here. Mick's fire went out, and Ari nearly cried. Neither had expected this, and their hearts almost broke at the sight. Callista moved across the landing pad, her gaze finding Stefan's as she slid to her knees in front of Zan, her hands shaking. You don't understand. Everything I do isn't good enough. It's still there. What's still there, son? Stefan asked him, concern in his eyes and in his voice. He had a thought and held out his hand for the Mandalorian to take hold of. Show me. Cautiously, Mick and Ari stepped closer. Show us, Ari said, extending a hand. Her eyes were soft and pleading. Callista's hand found Zan's other one, and she clung to it, biting her lip as she felt the swell of fear and grief from her husband. Zan looked down at his hands again before looking towards his wife. It wasn't supposed to go this way, but she just nodded, so Zan probed at the force. This will feel weird, he said. And as he touched the force, the images haunting him were now displayed in full. The vision began with the fight on Renvar. The Imperial squad was there on a ship of unknown design, but from the emotions swirling in Zan, they knew that whatever the ship was, it wasn't good. Then the scene shifted to Ossus, and there was a horrific scene of Jedi standing there like statues. They looked like wax mannequins except for the gruesome fact that they were ashen gray, eyes staring into nothingness, and the nothingness was that of sheer horror. Writing on the walls was done in blood of sentience, but the script none but Jedi remembered. The script was that of ancient Tython, the birthplace of the Jedi themselves. The message said, "One rises, and the rest die." Next, the vision swapped to the Imperials again, or what seemed like the Imperials. But the vision was like that of a broken kaleidoscope. Pieces were cut out and distorted. But the menace still hung in the air, and the sound of braying laughter chilled the blood. The scene flashed again, this time to the Mandalorians, and well-known faces showed throughout the scene, and it was far from good. How many have we lost now, General? 2/3 of the continent has fallen. It's like nothing we've seen before. Keep putting men on the front lines. I don't care how sick they are. We're the holding point. The Jedi can't do everything. The scene changed again to a nondescript building in what seemed like Nar Shaddaa. It was Zan, Mick, and Brink. If anyone knows this guy, I got a feeling it's in my old master's files. The scene changed again, but real panic began to set in for Zan. It was of little Evelina in her mother's arms, dying. Mommy, why does it hurt so bad? There was a tremendous surge in the force. The vision skewed further and nearly broke as the collective cries of the Phoenix and the Conduit almost tore the thin veil between worlds. Callista had to choke back a sob, but her hand that held Zan's shook as she saw that image. It tore at her heart. She felt the surge and felt it push at her. The anguish pulled at her soul. At that point, Zan's emotions became unglued, but the vision continued anyway. The scene shifted once more to a view of a mountainous planet, and the bad kaleidoscope began again. The voices now were just two of the Jedi. We've done everything we could, but there is no hope now. The galaxy is going to die. We can't stop the wounds. I'm gonna stop there because I think we have an ad starting. Okay. Okay. At least I think we have an ad starting. Maybe. I can never tell sometimes. Then the sound of the planet's core cracked, and then there was the sound of the planet's core cracking and breaking, and the vision faded to black. I'm gonna stop right there, actually, because I'm pretty sure we're about to have an ad if we didn't already. Oh dear. Okay. Just checking the camera. Yep, we're in an ad break. Ad break is a great time to get up, have a stretch, get some water, get a snack. So I'm actually gonna flip to BRB and do just that. Alrighty. And we're back from our ad. Thanks for hanging out, guys. I appreciate that. There we go. Okay. Hey, Wicked, welcome in. Good to see you. Mick and Ari withdrew then, fire blazing in the Phoenix's eyes and lightning dancing in her husband's. What? Mick said. Was that? Ari finished. Stefan's breath caught then at the last moment. Those mountains were as familiar to him as nothing else in the galaxy. It was these very same mountains that they were in now. The force of all the visions made him stagger back from kneeling and fall to the ground. You wanted to know why I feel horrible, Zan said, now openly crying. I saw the galaxy die. How we are doing things now only worsens the situation. Callista's hand slipped from Zan's and she slumped, gasping as her vision swam. She tried to breathe, but it was almost like she'd forgotten how. Stefan's eyes were tightly closed. Repeatedly, he replayed what he'd just seen in his mind. And you know that for sure? Ari knelt beside Zan, putting an arm around his shoulders. The future is a tricky business. Even the great masters of old could not read them fully. Mikron went to Callista and helped her sit up. He sent cooling waves of reassurance to her through the forest and whispered, Breathe, sweetheart. Breathe. It's okay. Zan sighed, but there was no fight left in him now. Because it's all I've kept seeing. Every development has only intensified this vision. Zan sounded rather broken. I needed your help, Ari, but I couldn't get this across without scaring you, or worse, Strolbait. Zan, Ari continued, I agree that something needs to be done, but we must think this through. I knew a boy once who tried to change the future he saw in his visions. The wounds have increased, my sister, Stefan said quietly as he sat up. There was a tear tracing down his cheek now. It was the main reason I called this convocation. Callista clung to Mick, her vision swimming slightly from the lack of oxygen. She sat there on the permacrete, leaning against him as she took slow breaths. She then looked up at him. It's strange that we didn't get the message. Mick looked at Stefan looked at her, realizing now that there was a degree of tension related to him. It was sent to all masters, Callista. She shook her head. We never got it. I think I may know why. Slowly, Stefan started to get to his feet. I'm pretty sure the New Republic has a mole in it, Mikron said. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. He helped Callie to her feet and then stretched out his hand to Stefan. We aren't going to let this thing consume us. Catan will be safe. Our families will be safe. Callista looked confused towards Stefan as she made her way to Zan, nodding her thanks to Mick as she pulled him over too. Zan spoke then, looking to Ari. I tried, but you know you and Mick. He grinned slightly. You're more stubborn than I am. He then looked to Stefan and back to Mick. It may be worse than that, Rogue. I think we don't know every mole that may exist. Mick turned to Zan. For what it's worth, he said, holding out his hand. I'm sorry. You could have just said, though, you know? Zan clasped Mick's forearm with his hand in the Mandalorian fashion. In my culture, Mick, the fight is the way to say something. Me too, Zan, Ari said as she helped the Mando to his feet. I didn't mean to ignore you. Zan looked to Mick and Stefan looked to Mick and Zan, starting to piece together some thoughts he had picked up during the entire experience. I think I may know how high up that mole is, too, Mick. However, we must head inside before Jade and Evelina become more curious. Zan rubbed his stomach as he began to walk with the group. Rogue, I'm sending you the bill for this, I hope you know. Callista grinned and shook her head at Zan's comment. Yeah, Mick nodded. For future reference, maybe don't surprise me like that. You've got a great right hook, but the rest was just kind of reaction. Yeah, Ari smirked. Thoughtless violence is part and parcel of the Krullian fighter pilot ego. Zan just laughed. Well, I know I'd rather have my blade beside yours than opposing it. But next time I get moody, crack me one in the jaw, okay? He smirked before looking at Ari. But that's the best kind of violence. Callista snickered and ducked her head, glancing sideways at Ari as they approached the house. You got it, Mick said, rubbing his jaw. I do hope Jade has an ice pack candy, though. I was wondering how long the 5 of you were going to stay out there, Jade said as they walked into the house. She caught Stefan's look. What happened? Want me to take a look, Mick? Callista asked, raising an eyebrow. I'll tell you later, Stefan answered. I better pull an ice pack out of the freezer for Mick if Callie says he needs it. He's just being a baby, Ari said, grinning at Callie. I am not, Mick protested. My jaw is clicking. Listen! I'd better go and kiss up to Strobate. She's probably ready to send me into orbit sans armor. Ari shoved the rogue away playfully and looked at Zan. You be nice to her. She really looks up to you, you know? Callista smirked a little and went to look Mick over, tisking at the purpling bruise that was starting to blossom across his jaw. I can get it back in place. She looked sideways at Zan. Hell of a right hook. You dislocated his jaw. Zan just shrugged. I was hoping to knock him out. He then glanced over at Ari. Really? She's got good taste, he said, jokingly, before making his way towards Evelina. My jaw is Ow! Mick yelped as Callie popped his jaw back into place. Sweet mother of... Callista grinned and shook her finger at him. No complaining. I think she's in the kitchen, Zan, Jade called after the Mandalorian. We were making up some flapjacks for the Corellian, though whether or not he can eat them will be up to his physicians. I take it all back, Mick said through gritted teeth. I'm going to kill that Beskar-plated bucket of Mando. He might have to settle for something softer right now, I think, Stefan said as he handed Mick a tumbler of whiskey. Just might help some. Meanwhile, Zan found Evelina relishing the goings-on. You think that's good? You should try my cooking, kiddo, he grinned. I knew there was a reason I liked you, Mick said to Stefan, a man after my own heart. Callista smirked and shrugged. I'd not recommend any hard foods. It'll be tender for a few days. Jade shot a look at Zan. You know, I might just trust you in my kitchen. Zanika! Evelina cried, and then looked to the Mando for confirmation. Did I say that right? Zan grinned at her. You sure did, Strobate. Nice to know you've been paying attention. He scooped her into his arms before giving Jade a mock offended look. You might? Shut up, Jade. Way to wound me. I was about to suggest running off with me, but you went and did that. Now you gotta suffer with Stefan. Jade just grinned and turned back to what she was doing. Oh, whatever will I do? Ew! Evelina made a face. Stop being all mushy. She tapped Zan on the top of his head with her little hand. You don't feel angry anymore. Are you done being mad at Mommy and Daddy? Zan looked at Evelina, and he looked sad. Alec, kiddo, I'm done being angry. Are you angry with me because of it? That got Jade's attention, and she looked at her husband again. Later, I promise, he said to her over their shared connection as he poured another tumbler for himself and Zan. They'd need it right now. Mikron grinned from where he sat in the corner of the kitchen, sipping his whiskey and eyeing the flapjacks mournfully. Ari sat next to him, playing with his hair. I wasn't angry, Zanika, Evelina said. I was sad. I don't want you and Mommy and Daddy to fight. But, she said with a mischievous look in her eye, if you hurt my mommy, I would have beaten you up. Callista gently took Mick's jaw in her fingers and looked at him. You'll be fine. It'll just be sore for a while. With a devilish grin, she swiped one of the flapjacks for herself before looking for something more substantial than Behat. Like I said, Ari grabbed some of the flapjacks for herself. He's just being a big baby. Are you, sweetie? She gently patted Mick's cheek, to which the rogue's eyes grew wide and he bit back a groan of pain. I love you too, princess, he ground out. I know. Ari smiled as she poured syrup onto the flapjacks. Well, that'll keep him quieter for a while, Stefan said as he sipped at his tumbler. Zan looked at Evelina and didn't doubt that that would be true one day. Now I'm scared. I'll be good to Mommy, I swear. Even when Daddy is being... He stopped. Well, being like Daddy is. Callista almost choked on her mug of Beehot at Stefan's comment. As it was, she dissolved into a coughing fit, waving off the looks of concern. He can be so unruly sometimes, Evelina sighed in an excellent impression of her mother. That comment from Evelina almost choked Stefan up, and he got up from the table to stand with Jade and swipe a flapjack. Zan laughed. Yep, but your mom likes that, he winked before adding, you'll understand when you're older. Zan realized his faux pas and turned a little red. Okay, Mick said, raising his hands in defeat. I surrender. Eat all the flapjacks. Enjoy my misery. I'm going to sit here and drink my breakfast in silence. That'll be the day, Ari said with a smirk. I see a YT-2000 parked outside. Andrea's voice sounded from around the corner. I know my Aunt Ari would have let me know when she got here. No matter how much Mick distracts her. Andrea! Cried Evelina, bouncing in Zan's arms. And what about Calica and me? Zan asked. Or are we just bantha poodoo? Sorry, dear, Ari said, waving. I was kind of distracted. Andrea came around the corner with Ian holding her hand and grinning at the crowd. Well, Callista is my sister, and she quietly let me know, Zan. And you're just another brother. Zan placed Evelina down so she could run to Andrea before walking back to Callista. Andrea knelt for the hug from Evelina, and then Ian took one as well. I was hoping for you're just drop-dead gorgeous, but that works, Zan joked. Mick laughed through the pain, and that's why people call you Your Highness. Your Highness. He waved at Andrea from his corner of the kitchen. It's a good thing you have a big kitchen card. It just barely contains the Mando's ego. Andrea giggled. Can you top a prince, Zan? Callista looked up from her plate of flapjacks and stood, pushing her chair away from the table as Zan came over. Her left arm settled around his waist as she watched Andrea with the little ones. Zan counted on his fingers. Let me get back to you on that. Callista grinned at Andrea and winked before kissing Zan gently. Speaking of which, Stefan said as he picked up Ian, I thought Edward was coming with you. He had a late meeting with some refugees. They want to see about setting up on a few of our colonies. Zan blinked and realized that he was still severely out of the loop. I don't mean to be a huge downer, but apparently I've been less in the know than I thought. Evelina, Ari said over the bustle in the kitchen, why don't you and Ian go play in the den? The grown-ups are going to talk about boring grown-up stuff. Okay, Mommy, she replied, grabbing her stuffed tauntaun. Come on, Ian. Ari looked at Zan after she nodded to Ian that it was okay. Andrea looked at Zan after she nodded to Ian that it was okay. A few groups of refugees have approached us from one of the systems the Empire has been invading. They were hoping to find sanctuary on a few of our colonies. We've been going over ideas for the last week or so. That caught Callista's attention. Do they have any particular ones in mind? Andrea nodded. One group has, but we haven't given them an answer yet because I haven't discussed it with Marin. What? Callista stuttered in surprise. Do they know it's inhabited? Does Catan have the resources to support the numbers coming in? Ari asked, her tone taking on a more serious note. It's a big burden to carry, and you do so much for the galaxy already. Spast, I wish we owned a planet. Micron, I want to buy a planet. Andrea shook her head. Only a handful know of their home there. We're considering some other options. And then she looked over at Ari. We're splitting the load, actually. Several other systems have offered to help. Sure, dear, Mick said. Let me just pull the coin out of the Firebird. The only thing left right now is the Outer Rim systems, and even the Hutts are tightening their control in the systems they do have. Not all of the Outer Rim, Stefan interjected. We've been able to halt their influence trailward of the Krellian Run. Last that I had heard, at any rate, and that was several days ago. There's another meeting in the grotto later this evening, Stefan finished. We need to get a plan going, Ari said. But the breakfast table is hardly a place to lay out a galaxy-saving strategy. Zan, I know you might not want to go through it again, but I think that the High Council and the Masters here need to see what you have shown us. Stefan looked across the table at Zan. Zan gazed at Stefan and nodded. I figured as much. And then he changed tack. But come on, Ari's right. We should be eating here. In Mick's case, it's drinking. But you get the idea. It's settled then, Mick said as he finished his glass. For now, I need to get the bird unpacked, and Stefan needs to show me where to put Renee's birthday present. Alright. That's the end of chapter 7. Give me just a second to check in on chat. Also, I apologize for the camera issues earlier. I'm hoping that it holds up. It seems to be. I just turned on the fan above me, so that might actually cut the ambient temperature just a little bit. Seems to be fine now. Okay. Alright. Take a little bit more water. Chapter 8. With breakfast finished, Jade shooed Ari, Zan, and Callie out of the kitchen. Mick and Stefan left to unload the Firebird and get things squared away in the guest house. Ari stayed in the kitchen to catch up with her mother. Andrea stayed in the kitchen to catch up with her mother, and Ian and Evelina were busy playing in the den. Ari, Zan, and Callie stepped onto the porch in the late morning sun. Zan blinked slightly from the sudden brightness, but smiled as he stepped onto the deck. Ari, he said, are you thinking me of sending me to the morgue for that stunt? I love this place in the summer, Ari said as she breathed deep into the pine-scented morning air. Coruscant's my home. I thrive in the Dur Creek Canyons and Durasteel jungle, but this is just beautiful. Catch me after I've soaked this in for longer than a minute, Zan, and you'll get that fight you've been itching to have. Zan readied himself, but nodded. This reminds me of the farm I tried to maintain on Mandaeum. The mountains surrounding the fields of blue corn and the vines for the late summer wines the farmers in the area make. But I haven't had much time for peaceful vistas. It's not my life's calling. You wouldn't like it for too long, Ari said with a knowing smile. Just like I wouldn't. Just like Mick wouldn't. Warriors aren't meant to be idle for long. But it's good to take a step back and breathe. Breathe it in once in a while. It lets you know what you're fighting for. Callista came out onto the porch, cradling another mug of Be Hot in her fingers as she wandered over to Zan and laid her head on his shoulder. She stood with them and watched the sun come up as she turned the vision over in her mind. Zan looked down at her. I'm about to receive my receipt for the landing pad stuff, he said. But your mom was reminding me about perspective. She grinned for a moment and looked at Ari. Mom's good for that. Perspective is important, especially now. Ari's grin turned wicked. I know you've been itching for this, Zan. But if it's me you want to fight, we'll do it my way. Stefan has a master's wheel under their house. No armor, no sidearms, just you, me, our lightsabers, and our skills. At that, Callista cast a speculative glance in Mick's direction. Could the master's wheel handle all 4 of them? Training sabers, of course, Ari amended as she watched Mick and Stefan out on the landing pad getting the bird unloaded. I don't want to send you back to Callie in pieces. Zan sighed. Itching for it isn't the phrase that I use. It's more like trying to shove a message into you, one that's 48 years overdue. He looked stiff again before responding. You may be the Phoenix, and Mick may be the conduit, Ari, but I'm not some pushover recruit straight out of the Coruscanti training pool. Callista nodded. We realize you want some time to yourselves, but your knowledge and experience are needed, especially now. She looked hard at Mick then, but it softened slightly. Nor I, Ari replied. I was a fighter pilot once upon a time, too, Zan. And a commando. The ego thing gets drilled into you when you're in the military. Nobody says you're a pushover. But I'll warn you not to underestimate us either. Together and separate, we've fought and defeated Sith Lords, mad clones, and tyrannical dictators. We've seen a few lifetimes of galaxy-threatening chaos and pulled through. I understand where you're coming from. It's the disrespect that sets Mick off. And I realize that, Callista, or I told her with a nod. But we weren't aware of the situation as Anne saw it. We were working towards fixing things. Now, with some more perspective, we know we must step back into things more fully. Zan grinned slightly. This is why Mandos aren't diplomats. We tend to run our mouths too much. But then he sighed. The Order needs you two. Evelina needs you. I feel that what you both were doing was foolish. Ooh, sorry. Not in the smuggling and trying to keep working with the New Republic, but settling for less than what you both are. Mandos have something called Bureau d'Aquenir, or battle circles. I was hoping if I provoked you to a fight, I could explain this to you while awakening the warrior I saw that I assumed that was dormant. I tell you what, Ari said. I'll make you a deal because a bit of my husband's Corellian has rubbed off on me, and that's how we work. Zan raised an eyebrow. Go on. You promise that the next time you have something earth-shattering to tell us, you'll do it like you just did, calmly and respectfully, she explained, and I will fight you in whatever way you wish. Zan grinned lopsidedly but stuck his hand out. Deal. And they shook. But don't expect my Vode to do the same. See, Ari said, there's a difference. You, I care about. You're married to my daughter. Your Mando brethren? I don't have a problem bashing their skulls in until they learn respect. Let me rephrase that, Ari said. Callista grinned slightly and Zan laughed. No need, General. You understand? They'd respect that. Ah, Ari said, smiling warmly. Your family is in. You don't need to attack us to get our attention. Just talk to us. Even Mick will admit from time to time that he actually likes you. But I didn't say that. She was quick to cover with a laugh. Zan chuckled. I may say the same thing if you catch me on the right day. Ari wrapped Callista in a hug, and we all love this gorgeous girl here, so we'll always have that in common at least. Callista's cheeks flushed slightly, and she momentarily leaned her head on Ari's shoulder. All of you mean the world to me. Zan smirked. True, but as for the gorgeous part, if you come by the temple, you may want to clean out some of the young initiates' mouths. It seems you're as popular for other things as you were for your military brilliance. Zan smiled at his wife, though. We have an ad starting in 4 minutes. Ari laughed and blushed a little. It's good to know I've still got it, she said. Though I think it's about time we focus on what we actually came here for in the first place. We should get our stuff unloaded and unpacked and see what we can do to prepare for Renius's birthday. I think we'll all be thankful for the short time we have to celebrate in the chaos that's to follow. Zan nodded. I still say Jade will kill Mick and chase you up the mountains for that gift. I did something sensible and gave him a bankroll. Callista raised an eyebrow at him. How much? Zan mumbled something and looked away. She poked him and smiled. How much, Shierica? I won't be mad. Ari blushed more and looked away for a moment. I wanted to give him the money in the form of a trust fund or something. Mick kinda won the decision to give him the bike instead. Callista chuckled. Well, Renius is practical and can certainly make good use of the trust fund. It's always good to have something for fun, too. 5,000, Zan finally answered. Yeah, the big bad Mandoad is an illusion only I have. Don't say it, Calica. He looked at Ari and frowned, concluding already. I'm not sure I want to know how he won either. And then he laughed. Yeah, Ari said, glad to have breezed over explaining how Mick won the decision. Besides, he'll have more birthdays. Callista smiled and then hid a grin behind her hand at the feeling she got from Ari. Why don't we get settled and enjoy our time here? It was then that Zan heard Jade chattering at Mick. Looks like Jade saw the present, so Renee's will have more birthdays and Mick won't. Oh, Shab, Callista muttered. I'd better go try to smooth things over, Ari sighed. I'll see you two later. Okay. Mikron and Stefan had just finished unpacking the Din family's luggage, and the two made their way to the cargo hold of the Firebird. Mick had covered the bike with a bit of tarp, and as he and Stefan stood next to the strapped-down speeder, Mick had the controls to lower the loading bay onto the landing pad. Something under the tarp glinted in the late morning sun, and Mick winked at the Jedi before grabbing the tarp and uncovering the bike with a bit of flourish. Stefan spent several moments looking it over before walking around the bike, checking over every detail his trained eye could see. Well, I don't have an issue here, he said as he looked over the rest of it. At least you didn't get the fully powered model. But, Mick, you know she will give you a look for this. By she, he meant Jade. And she might ask me to say something about it. He still shook his head and looked over the controls. How many kilometers on her, or is she fresh off the showroom? Fresh off the factory line, actually, Mick said, getting a surprised look from Stefan and an appreciative nod. You'll have to tell your boy about the warm-up period, but yeah, it's been modified for private use. The guns have been removed to make room for extra steering vanes, and the engines have a governor on them. Of course, you can turn it off if you're feeling adventurous. And I'm hoping you'll try to get your wife to warm up to the idea, Mick continued as he began to unstrap the bike from the grating. I mean, I had a swoop when I was 16 and I'm still alive. I was already flying in space by the time I was 18, and so was he, Stefan told him with a grin. Actually, Jade may give you some flack, but Andrea will probably get a little more than you will. However, I don't know why she gives either of you too much. There are several times when he's been behind the controls. Even on Mist, he was co-piloting White Squall. I'm gonna stop there because we're about to be in an ad. So... it's a great time to take a break, get a drink of water, or get a snack. I will be right back because I'm gonna do just that. And we're back. Alright. Mick shrugged. Well, at least there's that. Together, they finished unstrapping the bike and pushing it onto the landing pad. Where should we put it? Ari's got a big bow she wants to tie on the front. Well, Stefan thought about it for a moment. Let's put it on the pad elevator, he said as he tapped a control on his wristcom to start bringing the elevator up. It can sit there right next to Andrea's present. Andrea's present? Mick asked as he turned to where the pad had opened up. It took the elevator a few minutes to reach the ground level, but Mick could see the top of Andrea's old black XJ3 starting to show itself as the elevator came up from below. Stefan looked over to judge his reaction. Oh, you're kidding! Mick exclaimed as he pushed the bike to rest next to the sleek black XJ. He ran a hand along the fuselage, admiring the fighter from every angle and feeling the sudden urge to be in the cockpit again. I've been so very outdone by your daughter. The only reason you got outdone is that she doesn't have time to fly it anymore, Stefan said with a grin. The guard unit would go ballistic if she tried to climb into the cockpit. She complained to me a few weeks ago about it just sitting there. So, I dropped a subtle hint about what could be done with it. He slapped Mick's shoulder. Now, aren't you glad you took the guns off the bike? Micron laughed. Yeah, he shrugged. He's got plenty on this baby. You've got one lucky kid there, Card. But then again, he deserves it. Kid's been through almost as much as we had at his age. Worse, probably, he said as he ran a hand along the starboard S-foil. When I was his age, I never would have dreamed going through something like Mist. Although I remember Master Legato saying I had my head in the clouds quite a few times when I was his Padawan. He shook his head as he thought about it, and I feel like Mist isn't going to compare to what's coming now. Yeah. Mick's hand dropped from the XJ to his side. What are we going to do, Stefan? Obviously we'll fight this thing. But who do we fight, and how much of Zan's vision do we take verbatim? You know as well as I do that visions of the future are seldom what they seem. And you know your history. You know what happened to the last person who tried to change his nightmares. I think we all do, Stefan said as he leaned against the S-foil. We still don't know who this enemy is behind these wounds. The Empire is an obvious enemy. Catan has been ramping up our ability to face them and producing extra ships for the Republic, but I don't really see how it will help them. He shook his head as he said the last statement. There are so many problems on that front alone that require our attention. This is absolutely nothing like the two-sided fight we had at Endor and then Renfar. We were a cohesive fighting force then. This time, the Republic is something completely different. We've gotten divided in more ways than one. He sighed as he revealed the following tidbit of information. A grand example. Catan STC reported a sensor glitch at the edge of their scanning range. The battle group that was here at the time could only pinpoint it once they called me in. Do you remember those recon mobile suits that Nib Cadre made for Republic Intelligence Special Ops without my knowledge? Hi, Stitch Doll, welcome in! You mean officially? Mick said with an arched eyebrow. I have no idea what you're talking about. Unofficially? Yeah, I do, and I remember you being a little hot about the situation. Why? Well, Stefan continued, that was at the edge of the system, using its recon package on our facilities on Catan. It took 3 of our Hakana-class ships to corner it and convince it to decloak and surrender. And we hadn't unleashed hell on Maxwell yet because we didn't know where the pilot's orders originated. His recon suit bore New Republic markings, and I was able to determine Nib's signature work on the systems. Stefan was so frustrated by the memory that he almost wanted to slam his fist against the X-Wing's fuselage. The Republic is spying on us, of all people. We've been their strongest supporter alongside the Mon Calamari, the Wookiees, and several other species these last several years. Wonderful, Mick sighed, still admiring the XJ. It's times like this I almost wish I hadn't stopped smoking. Ari and I planned on investigating independently, Micron continued, but now... You know, things were easier behind the stick of one of these. You put the enemy in your sights and pull the trigger. I always thought the same thing, Stefan said as he looked over the mountains behind the X-Wing. When you're facing someone in the cockpit or face-to-face, you know exactly who you're dealing with. Now, we don't know who our real enemy is. Well, one of them, at any rate. It seems we have a whole selection to choose from this time. I imagine this will be discussed in the council meeting tonight, Mick asked as he went back to the Firebird to close her up. Stefan nodded as he stepped away from the elevator and tapped the controls to lower it again. Among other things, yes. We have most everyone here. Well, Mick paused over what he was about to say. What's your stance on us rejoining the Order? You're not going to make me swear on the Jedi Code, are you? And I'm sure Ari will want in on this thing too. Personally, oaths and all aren't going to make much of a difference, Stefan finally said as he thought about it. You two may have left the Order, but you are still Jedi in your hearts. Nothing changed in that regard, and I can speak for quite a few who will be there tonight when I say you will be welcomed. He traced the Firebird's fuselage and thought on a different subject. Mick, you may have been in the loop on a few more things than I have. Have you heard anything from Barab 1? Migron stopped and turned to face Stefan. He'd nearly forgotten about Einar. Stefan, he said, we've been trying to push into that section of Hutt space for months, and we haven't had any luck. The whole sector is locked down tighter than Hutt's coin purse, and our ships are already on the Hutt's most wanted list. I know we need him, but every mode of contact we've tried this far has had no results, and yes, we've tried contacting him through the Force. He nodded softly at this and sighed. I had thought as much, but I had to ask anyway. I've tried to reach him myself and have gotten no word. I wonder if one of those wounds we felt is there. If it is, we'll be heading that way soon, Mick said. He laid a hand on Card's shoulder. We'll find him, Stefan. I know what Ari would say about it, Stefan told him, but I wonder if I should have let him leave the last time. Ari's had a lot of time to think, Mick said. We all know that Einar's got to make his own decisions. You couldn't have kept him here if you tried. Aye, the Jedi said as he watched the elevator close up. Come on, Zan and the ladies will think I've killed you for Renese's new bike or something. Wouldn't want that, Mick agreed, rubbing his jaw. And besides, we should be getting ready for the party. We can talk about Galactic Doom during the council meeting. True, Stefan said as they walked. I have to get the fire going soon anyway to get enough coals. Oh, Mick said, turning and running back up the Firebird's ramp. I nearly forgot. Stefan stared after him momentarily, wondering what had gotten into the rogue. And then Mick came back down the ramp with a large crate in his arms. The marking on the box read, Wyron's Reserve, 50-year. We brought you some libation, Mick smiled. I remembered how hard it was to get good Corellian whiskey out here. Stefan looked at the markings on the box and shook his head. I'm not even going to ask where you found that. No, wait. Let me guess. Talon? Actually, Mick frowned. I haven't heard from your cousin in some time. I'm starting to worry. Nick and Vince found these on a run to Hutt space. Some crime lord's private stash or some such. Cost me a bundle. Mick sighed. But what are friends for? I keep your liquor cabinet stocked and you keep inviting me back for barbecues. Stefan couldn't help but laugh at that. Well, is there really any place on Coruscant that will cook your meal using a hardwood fire? You're okay, Sassy? Mick thought for a long time as the two walked back towards the house. No, he finally said. It's kind of depressing, really. They walked back inside with the case, and Jade looked at it. She shook her head at it until she saw the keycard in Stefan's hand. Is that... she started to say. Stefan, is that the key to what I think it is? He moved his head over in Mick's direction. What? Mick shifted the large crate in his arms. I can't see. She saw the key, Stefan warned him. Calica, you might want to ready your rippers and set them on stun, Zan joked. Ah, well, Mick laughed. Can you show me where to put this crate? Kinda heavy. Then your wife can kill us. Jade looked at Mick and then over at Ari. What did you two get him? A speeder bike? Sorry. Ari laughed weakly and looked at Jade apologetically. It wasn't my idea, she said. I wanted to get him a trust fund. Yeah, Mick said, still holding the crate, 'cause those are really fun. I wasn't kidding about the crate, by the way. It's not full of feathers. He's 18, Stefan told Jade, and he's handled that X-Wing before. That's an X-Wing. He's got room to fly, she started to protest. It's fine, Stefan told her as he kept himself between her and Mick. I checked it out myself, and he's a good pilot. Zan looked at the crate in Mick's arms. 50-year-old water, just when you think you understand Corellians. He motioned to Mick that he would grab the crate and set it down. Water? Mick looked shocked as Zan put the crate next to the kitchen counter. I thought even Mandalorians knew how to read. That's Wyron's Reserve, best whiskey this side of the galaxy. Zan scoffed. We can read just fine, Mick. Just that we have better taste in things like that. He smirked and saw Ari roll her eyes at him. What? When he actually tries narcoleth, then let's see what he says. Narcoleth? Mick arched an eyebrow. Sounds like it's distilled from blue corn and dirt. Stefan started heading towards the patio area off the garden to start the fire. He could at least say he had enough wisdom to not get into an argument over liquor between a Corellian and a Mandalorian. He walked out through the back door and onto the deck at the rear of the house, taking a moment to look over the mountains. Zan's vision coming to mind once more as he walked down to the stone slabs that made the patio area off the garden. In the center of the patio area was a sunken fire pit with a steel mesh plate 2 feet above the ground mounted to a pole so it could be swung out from over the fire. Okay, hydrate. A stretch would probably not be remiss either. I'll give you a free one. 'Cause I need it anyway. Oh yeah, I know. I could hear it too. I heard it too. Yep. I had to actually turn the fan on because my room does get really warm. Okay, sorry. I'm checking the camera to make sure it's not going to overheat again. But we're actually doing really well. I'd only did that once. So, okay. Here we go. In the center of the area was a stack of firewood was already in place in the pit with all the kindling and tinder needed to get it started, so Stefan moved the grill plate away as he started to strike a match. He laid the plate next to the tinder and saw the material start to catch the flame immediately. In a moment, the kindling would catch. Before long, the longer pieces of wood stacked in the box around the stand of kindling would also begin to burn. To the side were more trimmed pieces of wood to add to it and get enough heat to cook what meat and vegetables he and Jade had prepared. Stefan stood back as the fire picked up and began to burn well. He caught himself looking up again and could see a few stars beginning to appear in the late afternoon sky. So many times he had looked up there with his children and now his grandchild, telling them of all sorts of adventures that occurred among the stars. He didn't tell them much of the dangers out there, but they had seen them firsthand the last several years and knew what he had felt, wanting to keep those dangers away from home. Yet there was a new danger lurking and making itself known, and it could possibly destroy all he and his family held dear. Not while I'm here to stop it, he thought to himself, making himself an oath. Not while there is still breath in my body. Very likely could go to 9:30 or so, because we still got 2 more chapters. That was the end of chapter 8, by the way. Oh, let me Let me take care of that stretch for you. Oh, the hide. Sorry. Hydrate. My word, I can't compute today. Good grief. There we go. I can't run my computer today. It's terrible. Anyway, so we've read 2 chapters so far tonight. Or no, 3. We have 2 more. If we can get that far. So I may actually, it's almost 9 now, so I may go until 9:30 or 10. If everybody's cool with that. Usually my reading streams are only till 9. But I'm gonna see how far we can get. This chapter 9 is not super long. Not sure how long 10 is, but we'll see. And Wraith, I know you probably have to get ready to go to work, so whenever you have to duck out, I hope you have a good night. Alright. Okay. Chapter 9. Make head open. Oops, and I'm. There we go, yep. Yeah, I'm hoping that we'll be done by then. I don't remember how long chapter 10 is. Chapter 9. Mick had opened and unpacked the crate of whiskey into the card's liquor cabinet while arguing with Zan over the finer points of alcoholic beverages. In the end, Mick threw up his hands in frustration, grabbed a tumbler of whiskey for himself, and retreated to the den where Evelina and Ian were watching a kid's holovid. He plopped down in the oversized armchair and kicked his feet up on the low table in front of him. The laughter in the kitchen was a welcome sound. The footsteps coming his way made him grin even more. "Something on your mind, Callie?" Mick asked. Callista found him there a few minutes later, a glass of Netragal in her hands as she moved into the room. She smiled a little at his question. "I wanted to ask you something," she said quietly after staring into her glass for a moment. She wasn't usually this quiet, but Dan's vision had shaken her. She moved across the room and sat carefully on the arm of his chair, sipping her Netragal for a moment. Mikaron looked up at Callista and smiled. "Hey, Callie. It's me. You can ask me anything." That got a smile out of her. Lowering her glass, she looked over at him. Well, she stopped and grinned a little bit. "The original plan of Zan's was for me to take you on, but things worked out a little differently. I'm still a bit wound up from that vision." She reached up to tuck a few loose strands of hair behind her left ear. "Would you be up for a sparring match?" "Want a shot at the title, huh?" Mick asked with a smirk. "Or are you more interested in learning?" She laughed lightly. "I've got no interest in titles, Mick. I want to learn. Studying with Stefan after Renvar taught me a lot, but I know there's more to learn, especially now." "No worries, kiddo," Mikaron said, sipping his whiskey. "Tomorrow morning, meet me in the mountains. There's a clearing up in the hills just above the tree line on the north side of the estate. Bring whatever you want. But definitely bring an open mind." She grinned. "I know the place." And then she smiled at the last comment, taking a moment to drain her glass. "That you can be sure of." The rogue then looked to his other daughter, sitting on the floor with Ian and her stuffed tauntaun. They were watching a children's holovid about Ewoks. "I don't want this for her," he said, mostly to himself. "I don't want this for you," he said as he looked back to Callista. "War is all I've ever known, and I'm good at it, but—" His voice trailed off. She squeezed his shoulder gently. "None of us want this, Mick. Something has to give, but we have to end this. Somehow, or it will end us all," she finished, silently, shielding the thought carefully. "I know, dear heart." The rogue shook his head, bringing his thoughts back to the now. "Get something in my crosshairs and I'll be happy as a hawkbat on a Coruscant thermal. I wish I could find the cause and take care of it without involving you kids. Outside of that, though," the rogue continued, "I suppose the best I can do is teach you everything I know, and hope that it's enough." Her lips quirked briefly, and she wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "I wish finding the source was that simple, but it's not, and that means we all have to work together. That's part of what Zan was trying to tell you." Mick sobered a bit. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry things got as heated as they did." That said, I don't think he's not at fault. I get that whole Mando attitude, but even Mandos can show some respect. Insulting me won't get you much. Insulting my wife will get you laid out. And don't think you're entirely off the hook either, young lady. All of this could have been avoided by just talking to us. I'm hurt that you thought we wouldn't listen. But it's water under the bridge now. Mick looked back to Evelina. Don't think you can't talk to Ari or myself, okay? We adopted you, he said. We'll always be here for you. Callista opened her mouth to reply, then closed it, fidgeting with the sleeve of her tunic. She nodded. I know, it was hard to make sense of the signals we were getting. Council meetings without us knowing. Things like that. Sighing, she leaned over to hug him again. I'm sorry, we really should have done more to get in touch. Mick returned the hug. Don't worry about it. We're not entirely without fault on our end either, but for our part, I promise we'll try to keep in touch with you kids. Of course, the way things are shaping up, you may not be getting rid of us anytime soon. Evelina perked up at that. You mean we get to stay in Catan for longer? She asked, grinning. Maybe, Princess. Mick nodded. We'll just have to see. Callista chuckled a little. Mick, I'm 28 years old. I'm not exactly a kid anymore. She then cocked an eyebrow. How do you mean? Something go down on your last mission? She asked, silently. Aside from Maxo letting me know he's up to something? No, Mick sent back. I'm talking about tonight's council meeting and what's to come. You think your mom and I will be going anywhere anytime soon? Oh, Mick said aloud. I suppose I didn't tell you yet. Ari and I are rejoining the Order. We're getting to the bottom of this mess, and we'll see that Zan's vision becomes a bad dream. Callista nodded. I'm not surprised. Honestly, that's what we'd hoped you'd do. I really didn't want to force you, but we had to do something. We need to figure out what's going on. Yeah, Mick yawned and stretched from where he sat in the chair. But we can sort all that out later. Right now, I want to enjoy my whiskey, the company of my daughters, and this holovid about Ewoks. Seriously, he winked at Callie. The fat one's hilarious. Callista chuckled lightly and moved to sit next to him, pulling Evelina onto her lap as she immediately turned her attention to the holovid. See, Mick whispered, I'm going to share a secret with you for when your mother and I are gone, and you're left to fill our boots. You must take moments like this and hold on to them with everything you have. She nodded silently and slipped her hand into his. Sometimes that's all that keeps you going, isn't it? He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Truer words were never spoken. And that's the end of chapter 10. Sorry, so short, guys. We have an ad starting in 4 minutes, and I'm just gonna read the little chapter notes at the beginning here because I'm sure that you guys are probably thinking this question but don't want to ask it. So I'm just gonna read the chapter notes. For those wondering how Callista can call both the Cards and the Dins her parents, here is a little explanation. The Din and the Card families are already close. With Callista's master being killed and reflections of a Padawan, Stefan had taken over some of her training and had taken her under his wing. On the day of Callista's marriage to Zan, he unofficially adopted her into his family. Mick and Ari also adopted her, making them her official guardians. If memory serves, both of these events occurred in To All Things an End, although I can't recall the exact chapters because it's been probably 20 years ago that we wrote this. Yeah, been a while. Been a while. Chapter 10. Rhaenys' birthday party went over well, Mick thought. 18 wasn't technically childhood by most standards of sentient beings, but, like most of the people attending, the kids were forced to grow up fast. It was good to see the childlike joy in Rhaenys' eyes at the sight of the speeder bike. Micron firmly believed that growing up didn't necessarily mean giving up on toys. It just meant that the toys got bigger and more expensive. The meal Stefan and Jade prepared was fantastic. There was something to cooking meat over a wood fire that set Mick's mouth to salivating. It was summer in this part of Catan, and the whole group gathered around a large table on the lawn. The kids ran through the warm grass and chased each other amidst the mingling adults. For a few hours, the troubles of the galaxy seemed far away and inconsequential. The sound of laughter joined the buzzing flitnets in a steady lake breeze. However, like all good things, the party had to end sometime. The sun was setting when Stefan called the kids to start cleaning up. Surreptitiously, the Jedi went to each of the adults there who would be called to the meeting of the council. He found Ari and Mick near the cake table. Mick was helping himself to another piece, as Ari looked off to where Evelina and the younger children were playing. "We'll be holding the meeting in 2 hours," Stefan informed them, "though I need to see the two of you in my study about an hour before so we can get some administrative stuff out of the way. We need your signature, Ari, to reactivate your status on the council. However, since Mikron's last time participating in council business was 50 years ago, we should fill out a whole new profile for him." Luckily, when Master Skywalker granted our ravenous rogue, Stefan arched an eyebrow at Mick as the Corellian continued to stuff cake into his mouth. Mick just shrugged, and Stefan continued, "Granted him his masterhood. Tioni had already set up the filing systems, so that won't be much of an issue. Still, it will just take a little while to move him back to the active list." Mick said around a mouthful of food as he rolled his eyes. "What my husband is trying to say," Ari cast Stefan an exasperated look as she elbowed Mikron in the ribs, "is that we'll be there, Stefan. We'll ask Jade if she can watch Evelina for us." "I'm sure she'll be delighted," Stefan chuckled as Mick stared daggers at his wife and continued to eat. With a shrug, the Jedi nodded a salute to each of them and went to find Callista and Zan. "Really, Mick," Ari sighed, "am I married to a 5-year-old? Mikron smiled. "What? The cake's delicious!" And we're gonna stop there. I don't know about you guys, but when you find really good food, can you stop eating it? I don't think so. Should be done by, probably before 9:30. Okay. We're about to start an ad. So, be about a minute and a half, so I would take the opportunity to go get a drink or a snack, because I'm going to do the same. Wraith, can I get a Bet's reminder, please? Because I need to do that. Thank you. Alright, I should be starting momentarily, so I'm going to preemptively go to BRB. And we're back. I know, I got that too. I do like having frosted tools around though. It definitely helps. Because you can set it up to do custom shoutouts. So you can have it do timed messages, which is the one that talks about 25 years of writing. You can do a lot of stuff with it. It's really cool. Alright. So we are almost halfway through chapter 10, so we should be able to finish this, I would think, by 9:30 or a little bit later. Okay. Ari shook her head. I wish I had your uncanny ability to just shut off your worry at the drop of a hat. She leaned on his shoulder and watched as Evelina went around introducing everyone to her stuffed tauntaun. I'm scared, Rogue. Suddenly the Empire is acting imperial again, and doing an amazing job, I might add. The Hutts are expanding their influence like mad, and there are wounds in the Force popping up around the galaxy. Knights are disappearing faster than students can be trained. Sorry. And then there's Than's vision. How can you be so relaxed? Ooh, sorry. I'm lying, Princess, Mick said, and his voice had grown suddenly wary. Ari turned to see the rogue's eyes had grown cold, and he radiated anxiety in the Force. She shuddered at the overwhelming feelings of anxiousness, determination, frustration, and anger flowing from Mikron like a wave. However, as quickly as it came, it was gone, and her husband's face didn't seem to have as many lines. I trick myself, he explained as he forked the last bite of cake into his mouth. I make myself forget everything but what is happening right now, and I focus on the things that make me happy. I pretend that the rest of the galaxy doesn't exist and convince myself everything is okay. I lie to myself. He shrugged then. It makes it easier to hide what's happening inside and keep my feelings unnoticed and undetectable through the Force. If I can convince myself I'm happy, everyone else will assume I am. Mikron, Ari put a hand to his cheek. You're doing that so I don't worry more than I already am, aren't you? A little, the rogue grinned. But it's okay, Princess. You're thinking that you want to help me with my worries. You already do. The biggest key to convincing myself I'm happy is focusing on what makes me happy. Sweetheart, you and Evelina make me happier than anybody has a right to be. So, convincing myself isn't really that hard. Oh, Rogue, Ari smiled. When did you get so smart? Oh, Mick shrugged. I have my moments. That you do. Ari kissed him on the cheek but lingered near his neck, her lips barely touching his skin as she spoke. You know what helps me take my mind off things? I'm getting an idea, the rogue gulped, and I really hope I'm right. Ari wrapped her arms around his neck. I'm going to go see if Jade will watch Evelina, and then you and I will head to our quarters on the bird, where you can help me relax. Mick could feel the heat spreading through his body from her touch, and he smiled. Absolutely, he said as she turned to go find Jade. He made sure no one was looking and gave her a quick slap on the backside as she walked away. Hurry up, he teased as he looked at his chrono. We've only got 45 minutes. She smiled at him over her shoulder as she walked away, and the look she gave him could have melted the ice caps on Hoth. Hastily, Mick threw away the disposable plate and fork he'd been using and headed for the Firebird. Jade walked over to Stefan, who was finishing up his plate, and casually sat down next to him so she could keep an eye on Evelina and Ian. So tell me, Master Jedi, I've been wondering about something for a while, and I think you can help me with it. Oh, I can, my lady, Stefan replied with a smile. He was getting an idea of what was heading his way. Yes, you can, she said as she kissed his cheek. How did Andrea decide to give her X-Wing to her little brother as a present, knowing how much she enjoyed it since you gave it to her? An interesting question, Stefan said as he jokingly rubbed his chin and thought. How do you know she didn't decide to do it on her own? Jade's look was enough to tell him that the jig was up and he was caught in his part of that present. My love, you may be able to keep secrets from most people in this galaxy, but having known you and loved you most of my life. She playfully traced his cheek. You can't keep anything from me. And I know how old our son is, and I'll be okay with him having the bike and the fighter. She leaned against him and traced his hand with her fingers. At least he can fly it without incurring gossip from some of the nobility. Half the things I hear being said about Andrea sometimes almost make me want to ask you to issue challenges. No talk of that tonight, Stefan said as he looped his arm around her shoulders. Just enjoy the kids running around for a while. She heard the way he said that and looked up at him. I know that there was another meeting tonight. I can tell the tone will be different with Mick and Ari there, along with Stan and Callista. Stefan, what happened at the landing pad earlier? He sighed heavily for a moment, knowing he would have to relay this at some point or another. Inwardly, he'd hoped not to talk about it now, but he wouldn't hide this from her, so he leaned over to whisper it in her ear. Her eyes widened and she held her breath for a long moment before she looked at him with concern. Master Yoda has said that the future was always in motion, Stefan told her. There's no real sign that it could happen, but nothing that say that it couldn't. Can it be stopped? I know that it can, he said, truthfully. How, and at what cost, though, I don't know. He looked at his chrono for a moment. I suppose I should pull up the files I need in my study before Mick and Ari decide to come out of the Firebird. It may be a little while, Jade said, laughing at the thought. If I hadn't known better, I would have sworn I saw the Firebird swaying on its landing struts earlier. Stefan almost choked on the drink he'd been taking when she said that. I'm sure it was just an illusion, dear. Uh-huh, Jade said with a laugh as they got up, her heading towards the kitchen and him heading for his study inside the house to pull up the files. He had everything set and ready as Mick and Ari entered the study. Stefan looked up at them and chuckled again. What? Ari asked with an innocent look. Your hair is still messed up, Stefan said as he put down a data pad for each of them. Here's the bit we needed that signature on. We'll probably head up towards the grotto in a little while. Ari tried to ever so casually move a few strands of hair behind her ear as she looked over the notes and nodded, trying to keep from blushing as she signed. Mick came over with a grin and looked at his. Well, Stefan, sometimes you just can't fight the... I don't need to know about it, the Jedi broke in with a laugh as Mick put his signature on the datapad. Where exactly is this place, anyway? Mick asked as he set it down. Just a nice, quiet spot that I picked out. An hour later, Stefan and the others walked into the grotto. This time, Dylan was waiting for them and had already lit the fire that would give them some light as Stefan and a few others started to take seats among the different stones and trees that circled the area. Once all the masters and council members were arrived, Stefan stood and called the meeting to order. Now, the challenge really would begin. I must say, I'm glad to see the four of you here now, Strain said with a chuckle from where he was sitting against a tree. You know how we are, Mick said as he sat beside Stefan. We just can't stay out of things. As we each wish we could in our own way, the older Jedi replied with a knowing nod, and then he looked to Ari. And looking just as pretty as ever. Ari had to laugh as she sat down next to Mick. He always knew how to be charming, Strain. Stefan grinned and enjoyed the fact that there was a genuine camaraderie that had remained for most of them over time. I should say that Mikron and Ari have rejoined our ranks as masters this evening, and I, for one, am very grateful for it. Full masters? Juan Cartega asked. The statement instantly caught his attention, and Ari turned around to look at him. Yes, they are, Stefan said before Ari could say anything. From the moment they met years ago, Ari and Juan had had a rocky time together, and Stefan thought that was putting it mildly at the best of times. Thankfully, time and experience had mellowed Cartega. I don't think any of us can deny the power and abilities they have shown, Roland said as he laid a calming hand on Juan's shoulder before taking a seat on one of the stones around the fire. And I, for one, won't deny them the respect they've earned. You'll have to forgive me, Juan told them. I didn't mean anything negative about it. He smiled and nodded to Ari, wanting it known that whatever differences they had were buried now. Kai Kwon-dae brought everything to order with what he had to say. I've pondered and meditated on what we discussed last night, he said as he looked at all of the council members and the other masters who were present. I must agree with what Master Christian and Stefan have said. The resurgence of the Empire is a major threat, but I truly believe now that our main concern as an order must be on these increasing numbers of runes in the Force. Stefan nodded and took his cue. Kai, I feel the situation may be worse than we first believed. That got Christiane's attention, and she looked up from where she had been pondering her own thoughts. What do you mean, Stefan? He gestured towards Zan and Callista were sitting close to Ari and Mick. Master Canadius has shared a series of visions that he has been experiencing over the last while. To say that it was disturbing would be a gross understatement. Zan, he started to ask as he looked towards the Mandalorian, I would like you to share what you showed me with everyone here. It may be difficult, but they all need to hear or see this. And that's the end of chapter 10, guys. Hey, look, it's not even 9:30. Cool. Right. How's that for timing? Alright. I'm looking for a raid target, although I should probably maybe just go to bed. It's been a long day. Let's see. Okay. Yay. Okay. Alright, guys. If you could hang around for this raid, I would greatly appreciate it. We're gonna go say hi to Foxy, who is another awesome streamer that I know. I try to spread the love around with the raid train when I can. Not always raid the same people. So, if I could type, that would be great. Good grief. So I would greatly appreciate if you guys could hang around for that raid. I know most of you will probably have to raid and run, and that's okay. But if you could tag along for the raid train, it would be very much appreciated. So that first raid command is for anybody who is subscribed to the channel. And then, oh, wow, I really need to learn how to type again, I swear. And then the second one is for anybody that's been watching or anybody that just follows the channel but is not subscribed. Okay, let me get this set up. Okay. Foxy is currently playing a Monster Hunter. So we're gonna go say hi to her. And I would greatly appreciate if you guys could tag along. I hope you enjoyed the story tonight. We have lots more chapters to get through. I think there's like 38 or 40 chapters. They're not all super long, but there's a lot of chapters. So, I will be reading again in 2 weeks on Wednesday. My next stream is going to be next Wednesday, and it will be for SWTOR. So if you guys want to hang around for that next Wednesday, that would be awesome. And hopefully we'll see you again in 2 weeks as well for story time. Thanks so much, Sassy. Wow, I can't even words. Thank you so much, Sassy, for being here, and everyone else. I do honestly hope that you enjoyed the story, and that you have a great night and a great rest of your week. That's one of the main reasons why I try to read in the middle of the week, give everybody a little bit of downtime and a place to just come and relax. Lurkers are very much welcome. I appreciate them. So have a great night, everybody, and we will see you next week.